Airports that once overflowed with travelers now stand eerily silent, their empty halls echoing a larger truth. America's tourism lifeline is bleeding out. Since the start of 2025, international arrivals have collapsed. Canadian visitors alone dropped by nearly 40% in June, stripping the U.S. tourism industry of an estimated $29 billion in revenue. Hotels, shops, and attractions from coast to coast are scrambling to survive. Experts warn this is not a minor downturn but a breaking point, a tourism crisis unlike anything the U.S. has faced before.
Stunning images of near-empty passenger planes are popping up on social media. These international flights have many tourists flying to the USA practically alone. Shauna Massengill flew from London to Chicago. Look, barely anyone on board.
There was nobody there. There was nobody in my row. It was really shocking. I've never been on a flight like that.
International air routes, once the golden arteries of the service economy, are being severed at an alarming rate. Air Canada, Icelandair, and WestJet have already slashed flights to major hubs like New York, Boston, and Detroit, citing demand that has all but evaporated. The numbers tell a devastating story. Advanced bookings on Canada-US routes in April plunged more than 70% compared to last year. Land crossings fell by 12% in February, 18% in March, and then a shocking 35% in April. Even the summer season, traditionally the crown jewel of American tourism, wasn't spared, with flight frequencies cut during peak months. What was once a steady flow of Canadian dollars, over $20 billion in 2024, has dried into a trickle. And the damage isn't just about vacationers. The ripple effects are threatening America's global image. The 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, once seen as golden stages to showcase U.S. soft power, now risk being played before half-empty stands and barren hotels. Billions poured into airports, stadiums, and resorts could yield nothing but empty seats and silent streets. Tourism analysts now warn that if left unresolved, the service sector could bleed an additional $50 billion and wipe out hundreds of thousands of jobs. Many point to the root cause: hardline Trump-era policies, a mix of restrictive immigration rules, trade wars, and tariffs that alienated key partners, especially Canada, has left America isolated. What was once the world's most visited nation now faces the chilling possibility of becoming one that travelers deliberately avoid. Harsh tariffs and hardline policies have made the United States appear far less welcoming in the eyes of international travelers. The 25% tariff on Canadian goods, for example, has fueled a Buy Canadian movement, urging citizens to spend at home rather than across the border. The impact has been dramatic. A recent survey found that 91% of Canadians want to reduce their reliance on the U.S., with 85% now choosing domestic products and vacations over American getaways. For an industry that leans heavily on Canadian visitors, the consequences are devastating. Airlines have sounded the alarm with sweeping cancellations. Air Canada has suspended service to Detroit, Indianapolis, Minneapolis, Nashville, and Tampa, cutting more than 300,000 seats in just one summer. WestJet has abandoned 9 U.S. routes, shifting its focus toward Europe and the Caribbean. Flair Airlines, known for its budget fares, has ditched unprofitable American destinations in favor of Mexico, Jamaica, and even Paris. Even Air Transat, a smaller carrier, is reorienting toward Europe, where demand is still climbing. This mass withdrawal has triggered a domino effect. Hotels, restaurants, and retail shops in cities like New York, Orlando, Miami, and Las Vegas are reeling from the loss of visitors. Duty-free stores in border towns report revenues cut in half. Travel agencies built around Canada-US tours have seen cancellations surge 30%, while agencies in Quebec alone recorded up to a 60% spike in canceled Disneyland trips, just in a single month. These numbers expose a brutal truth. America's tourism machine, once generating hundreds of billions each year, is cracking under the weight of policy and perception. The America First mantra has carried an unintended message abroad, one of exclusion, not invitation. Harsh tariffs, strict immigration rules, and tense rhetoric with allies have tarnished the country's long-standing image as a land of welcome. And the cost is staggering. For every 1% drop in international arrivals, the U.S. loses an estimated $2 billion in revenue and 140,000 service sector jobs. With international tourism projected to fall 15% in 2025, the numbers point to a looming collapse that is no longer just economic, but symbolic of a fading American promise. The American economy now faces the risk of losing up to $30 billion and more than 1 million jobs. And the damage doesn't stop at airlines or hotel lobbies. It ripples through the entire supply chain, from retail and entertainment giants to the small cafes that once thrived near airports. The pressing question is no longer if the U.S. tourism industry can recover, but how. Experts are urging Washington to act quickly, soften tariffs, repair strained ties with partners, particularly Canada, and begin restoring the country's global image. Without swift action, rebuilding trust and luring back international travelers could slip out of reach. What once seemed like a temporary dip is now beginning to look like a structural collapse, a shift that could permanently weaken America's role in global tourism. Each vanished visitor leaves a deeper scar. Major airlines cut routes, boutique hotels close wings, even local diners near airports stand half empty. The revenues that once contributed hundreds of billions each year are plunging at a pace few believed possible. The U.S. Travel Association reports that the 40% decline in Canadian visitors during just the first months of 2025 has already cost at least $12.5 billion. If the trend continues, losses could exceed $30 billion before the year is out. Popular destinations, New York, Miami, Orlando, Las Vegas, are seeing hotel bookings fall by 15 to 20%. Properties that once overflowed with guests during peak season now leave hundreds of rooms dark, forcing thousands of servers, chefs, and receptionists into reduced hours or unemployment. Restaurants slash prices to lure absent diners. Retail outlets shorten their hours. Even the busiest tourism corridors in America's great cities are falling quiet, as the shock spreads from the airport gates to the sidewalks beyond. Some small businesses along the border, almost entirely dependent on Canadian visitors, have seen their revenues collapse by as much as 80% in just a few months. Duty-free stores report losses of nearly half their income, a clear sign that the damage is bleeding through local economies. Transportation services, from taxis to airport shuttles, are reeling. Tour operators, ticket agents, and entertainment centers face wave after wave of cancellations. Even global attractions like Disneyland and Universal Studios have been shaken. In Quebec alone, agencies reported a 60% surge in canceled tickets in a single month. The storm of unemployment is growing, with service sector workers, from hotel receptionists to restaurant servers, standing on uncertain ground. Even major U.S. airlines like United admit that Canadian passenger numbers have plunged, forcing route cuts and disrupting hub airports across the system. Meanwhile, Air Canada, WestJet, and Icelandair have withdrawn from dozens of U.S. routes, erasing more than 300,000 seats in the first half of 2025. Planes fly half-empty, runways sit quiet, and the mood across America's once bustling airports has turned bleak. The timing couldn't be worse. Massive events like the 2026 World Cup and the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics, long marketed as money-printing machines, now risk becoming economic black holes. Billions poured into stadium upgrades, hotel expansions, and airport projects could all be wasted if visitors don't show up. What will it mean for America's global reputation if the world tunes in to see empty stands and silent streets? At the root of this crisis is a set of foolish decisions. The Trump administration's relentless America First rhetoric, its harsh tariffs, and its entry bans have backfired spectacularly. Instead of protecting the economy, they've alienated allies and driven away visitors. Was it wise to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian goods, knowing it would fuel a buy-Canadian movement that is now stronger than ever? Did anyone in Washington stop to ask how ordinary American businesses, cafes, hotels, small shops would survive without Canadian customers? Canada, in contrast, has acted with pragmatism. It has turned this challenge into an opportunity, encouraging its citizens to spend domestically and expanding air routes to Europe and the Caribbean. In doing so, it has not only kept its tourism alive, but also drawn travelers, including some Americans, north of the border. Shouldn't the US be learning from this smarter approach rather than clinging to failed slogans? The numbers leave no room for denial. Every 1% drop in international arrivals costs the US $2 billion in revenue and 140,000 jobs. With a projected 15% decline in 2025, America is staring at losses of at least $30 billion and possibly double if the trend continues. Major hotel chains like Marriott and Hilton have already cut forecasts. Airlines slash routes, retail and real estate markets near tourist hubs are buckling. This is no longer just about vacations. It's about the United States losing its soft power, its cultural reach, and its reputation as a welcoming land. Once that trust is gone, can it ever be fully rebuilt? How long will it take before Canadians or Europeans or Asians see the US not as a cold and closed-off destination, but again as a place worth visiting? The message is clear. Unless Washington reverses course, repairs its alliances, and begins to treat visitors not as burdens but as valued guests, the US risks a long-term decline in tourism, and with it, a painful blow to its global standing. So I'll ask you, do you think America can rebuild this trust? Or has the damage already gone too far? And what do you make of Canada's decision to stand tall and protect its own economy rather than bend to Trump's reckless policies?